Afraid to paint on your good paper? This week's video is all about the importance of tracing and transferring, and of course, we will paint some lovely flowers as well. Welcome back, friends. My name is Shayda Campbell, and around here we make art, and it's fun, not scary. What I really want to show today is the importance of tracing and transferring when planning out a watercolor painting. I'm working in my favorite sketchbook. All supplies are linked in the video description, and I begin usually by just figuring out how large the area of flowers will be, so a big circle or oval. And then I'll put a little vase down there. And then we're going to make the circle kind of lumpy, kind of get more of the shape of that overall bouquet. We'll put our little stems in there, make a water line. And then if you want, you could kind of draw in some little flowers and maybe a shadow in front as well. So this sketch can be very messy. What we're really working on here is just getting the proportions. How large is the area of the flowers? Like how large is the bouquet? And then what does the jar or vase kind of look like? Then you can grab a pen. I'm using the Meloto black liners, and we'll start adding some detail. I'm putting highlights on the upper left and lower right of the jar. I am kind of making sure I like the shape of that shadow and adding some details in the flowers, maybe adding a few leaves and stems. Now our illustration looks great, but we are not done. Grab a piece of tracing paper because we are going to trace your drawing. And what we're doing here is refining the image. Tracing allows us to keep what we like about what we've created and change what we don't. So think of it as an author editing their own work. Tracing is so powerful. You can, make the flower area a little larger, make the vase a little smaller. It also allows us to transfer the image. That's why this video is all about tracing and transferring. Flip that paper over, put a layer of graphite on the back, then flip it back over and place it on your watercolor paper. If you're someone who's scared to use your good paper, this is going to be very powerful for you. We're going to trace over the image that we know we really like and that we've, perfected, refined with the tracing process. And that process is going to transfer just enough of that drawing to our good hot pressed watercolor paper. Now we're ready to begin our painting. And I'm going to be I've got a couple filbert brushes, a number 8 and a number 6, and a number 6 round brush. It's quite a small painting on like an 8 or 7 by 10 hot pressed block. So using smaller brushes. Now the first thing I want to do, and I'm using my little Shayda Campbell watercolor set here. This is available on Amazon.com and Amazon UK. I want to mix up a couple different colors of blue. So take an ultramarine blue or the turquoise and just mix in a little bit of white, a little bit of water, maybe put a little of the magenta or the rose madder hue into one so that you get a more purpley blue or a warmer blue. Maybe add a little bit more water, a little bit more white. The key here is we're making flowers that are basically 5 little brush marks, so 5 little rounded petals, but we want the petals to kind of be different colors, different transparencies, some a little darker, some a little lighter, and you can do that by adding a darker blue or simply by, adding more water to the blue that you already have or adding white. What we're going for here is what I would call an abstracted forget-me-not bouquet. So abstracted just means that you've sort of changed the original forms. You're not sticking to reality. And that's what I want to do here. Forget-me-nots are so tiny, so seeing a cluster of them is kind of like seeing a swarm of bees. It all kind of blends together in the prettiest way. And you can do that by just doing brush marks, putting down some watery paint and lifting a little bit. So using your paper towel to lift up some of that watery pigment. I like the way that looks. I actually found that some of my pencil marks here from the transfer were too restrictive. I felt like they were going to show through the paint. So if that happens, you can just erase them and then come in with your paint and do the flowers kind of right where you remember them being from the transfer. So that's one way to do things. Our flowers are looking lovely, like a blue buzzy swarm of bees. And so let's move on and do the stems at the top of the jar. Now I'm using a sap green with a bit of brown in it, and I'm just doing thin and thick lines, and I'm being careful to avoid that highlight. So thick and thin lines go around your highlight area, and then if they look too stiff, you can sort of muss them up with a wet brush, a damp brush. Okay, next I want to mix up a light gray color for the water area. So use a bit of burnt umber, little bit of Payne's gray, a little bit of white, and a whole lot of water so you get a nice transparent light gray. And we're going to bring that over here. Again, lots of water in my brush mixed in, and we are going to carefully avoid the highlight area, and I'm leaving a white line at the water line and then some highlights on the jar. You can see I take a darker gray and kind of do the perimeter of the jar with some messy lines. Maybe put a little darker gray in around the wet area, the water area, leaving the two highlights and then a line of white across the water where that water line sits. We're gonna let that dry for a second. Have a sip of tea. We just don't want it to be too wet when we start doing the stems that are below the water line. You could lift a little color if you want to, a little wetness, and then we're gonna come in here when it is very, very lightly wet, but almost on its way to dry, and we are going to do lines, both thick and thin, mostly thicker, and if they bleed and blend a little, that's a good thing. And again, be careful to avoid the highlight. That's really all there is to it. And it'll look nice and watery, like a vase that is full of flowers with their stems and leaves. We're painting so confidently on our good copy paper today, and that's because we traced and transferred our sketch and perfected our sketch through tracing. Now that's the kind of thing that I get into in depth in my floral illustration e-course. It's an intro to floral illustration, and that's available on my website. Go check it out and use the code on the screen to save 35% with our big spring sale. I think even as a painter, as a watercolor artist, it's important to have those illustration skills, at least some illustration skills as well. Anyway, let's get back to this painting. I am using my nice dark green here. This is sap green with maybe just a hint of Payne's gray in it. I like the way that blue-gray darkens my green. And I put a few leaves and stems, and then I'm taking the lightest, like the most transparent watery green, and sort of filling in this big area in the middle, and I'm doing that with vertical brush strokes, messy vertical brush strokes. Then I come back with that darker green and continue doing little splotches and lines to give the appearance of leaves in behind these flowers. Now it's time to make some magic. Now we use that same dark green, and we're going to do some lines over top of the light green. Make sure it has dried. This is a wet on dry technique. And we're going to do some V shapes, some larger dark areas, but you're always leaving little stem shapes, basically, lines of that lighter color so that those stems really pop, but you're building up depth. It's looking really good. It's looking really detailed, but that wasn't hard to do. Oh yeah. This is why you need the e-course. Go get it using that code for the big spring sale. We always do our largest sales in the spring and summer because that's just a fun time to learn. That's like painting season. You can get outside. Okay, enough Shayda. We're going to do some leaf shapes. We're going to do some little messy leaves. I'm lifting a bit of color if I feel like the leaf is too dark or too stiff. You can always lift a little, do some more wet into wet magic. I'll take a darker gray and add a little bit more to that vase, and maybe add some darker color in the water area. So underneath the water line, I want things to look a bit shadowy. I want to give the impression that the jar is round. You can see me doing that there. But yeah, this is an abstracted painting. Things are a little messy and crazy, and that's what I like about it. I also mixed a little blue and magenta into my gray to give me kind of a mauvey gray, and that's what I used for the shadow, and I'm just doing horizontal brush strokes, maybe a little more lifting. Gotta have that paper towel. That's like the main character in today's video, my messy paper towel. And then to finish up, we are just going to do a few more splotches of that light blue. Before I was using the filbert, now I'm using the round brush so I can get a slightly different shape perhaps, although I'm not too worried about the shape. As I said, I'm abstracting a lot. But I can add a little bit of darker color, really make those flowers pop. At this point, it's kind of nice to stand back from your piece and just say, okay, what does it need? If there's too much detail, that happens sometimes if you're seeing flowers and petals and lines and stems, you know, add a bit of darker but I'm pretty happy with this. Although, did I stop? No, I never stop. I never know when to stop. That's a theme of like every video. I wish I would have just stopped, but I kept adding, and then I didn't really like that high up leaf, so I just kind of lifted it so it was really, really light. And now we are going to stop. Okay, we're stopping. We're stopping. She's stopping. Okay, so I let that dry. I went and had my lunch, and then I decided I wanted to do a little mixed media. That's just my middle name right now. So I did the centers of the flowers with a yellow colored pencil, and then I decided to use a light sky blue to just do some like really messy scribbly lines on some of these flowers and make them appear even more buzzy. That's going to be my word for this video. Another idea that I had in mind from the get-go was that I wanted to maybe draw some flowers that weren't painted, just to give the piece a really free, fun spring look. When you are drawing or paint, anytime you're creating art, you're trying to create a feeling. You're not just trying to capture what you see in front of you or what you have in your mind's eye. I wanted to give the feeling of this buzzy bouquet of forget-me-nots, and so I felt like the colored pencil really helped me to do that. I hope that makes sense. I think it makes sense. All right, I signed it. She's done. I'm happy with this. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. The beauty of tracing and transferring is so infinite. It helps you to refine your own work, transfer it onto that good paper, and build your confidence. Head to my website to check out my e-courses, which are all on sale. Use that code on the screen to save big, and then head over to Patreon, because the first weekend of the month means there's a bonus video over there, and we are making the sweetest cards for Mother's Day, baby showers. I just think these cards are great for pretty much every occasion. All right, thanks friends. I'll see you over on Patreon with that new tutorial. Bye.